this very important topic. So this morning we are talking about leaving no one behind, a focus on mental health and neurodiversity in the workplace. We have some very talented speakers, and we have Don Watson. He is our rapporteur for the event. He's with Merck. Our first gentleman, we are going to start with Shahar, and I apologize to him for butchering his name. And then Megan will go next, and they're going to introduce themselves, and then Eugene and Neil will go last. We will have a couple of videos and presentations on all of them. So we'll also try to make sure that we have time for your questions. So please think about a couple of questions that you want to ask, but we'll do the whole panel, and then we'll leave questions at the end. So let's go ahead, and excuse me. I'm Debra Rue. Sorry. I think all day we're going to be doing this. So the battery went off on my iPad last night, and I overslept. I got up at 8:38. But I got here on time. Thank goodness for their wonderful bus transportation around here. So anyway, I'm Debra Rue, and I'm with Rue Global Impact, and we really focus on making sure the stories of disability inclusion are heard all over the world. Very active on social media. Part of Access Chat with Neil, which is a tweet show, a Twitter chat show that talks about disability inclusion and accessibility. We've been doing it for 5 years, interviewing guests every single week, tons of good content. So there's a lot of good data out there. I put some of that out there on the app, but this is a very important topic. I'm a strategist, and I speak all over the world about inclusion of people with disabilities, but this particular topic is really, really, really confusing for employers. So without further ado, we will start with Sharjah.
Okay, so nice to meet everyone. Apparently I'm the first one, so good luck for me. My name is Shahar Schestatzky. I'm a COO. Can you put the PowerPoint big? Is it? Okay. I'm a COO in Shikum. It's a non-government organization that gives services to the Ministry of Health in Israel. Shikum means a different rehabilitation. I'm very excited to be here, and I will tell you about a unique program we developed for integrating people with mental disabilities in the changing job market. But first, a few words about us. Shikum is a non-profit association, a certified contractor for the Ministries of Health and Defense, which offers workforce and career development programming for people with mental disabilities. The association has been operating since 2004. We integrate advanced technologies and a dynamic approach to the workforce into our services. The programs are effective and unique. They combine a variety of workforce and career development solutions, which are adjustable to the needs of our clients. Two of our programs are model developed in-house and operated only by us. The first is WorkIt, which targets young adults, ages 18 to 35, who have mental disabilities. The goal of this program is to help the clients build themselves a career path and make better informed decisions about it. This is achieved through to jobs and study opportunity and exposure to jobs and studies. The second program, which is one I will explain today, is called the Center. In this program, we operate a course which prepares our clients to better integrate into the new, dynamic, and changing job market. I think the best introduction to the Center is through the eyes and words of our alumni. Let's see if it works. Okay. The course gave me the tools I needed to find a job, whether about handling interviews or looking for potential jobs. I feel that this is exactly what I needed. Thank you so much for everything. This client works in QA after she finishes the course. Before that, she was in sheltered factories, something like 5 years. Other one. Maybe you can pass, it will be easier. Okay. The course gave me back important job skills, such as punctuality and teamwork. The staff helped me regain my confidence in my ability to succeed and get promoted. Now, through facilitated employment, I return to the job market with my new tools. This client is a lawyer working at a law office after something like 8 years that he worked in non-skilled jobs. Okay. The first thing that was important to us in developing the course is the principle of gamification. I don't know if you know it, but I will talk a little bit about it. Gamification is application of game design elements and game principles in non-game context. Gamification commonly employs game design elements to improve user engagement, organizational productivity, employee recruitment, and evaluation, and more. A majority of studies about gamification shows that it has a positive effect on individuals and learning. The main goal is to achieve better learning. Through gamification, it's better. The second thing that was important to us is the physical space itself. As you can see in these images of the center main hub, it was important to us that the center will look contemporary, respectable, and so respectful of our clients, which is quite different than what they are used to in mental health infrastructure, in Israel for sure. With these guiding principles in mind, the rationale for us developing the center is that there are multiple gaps between the person with disabilities and the contemporary job market, which is a dynamic and ever-changing environment, totally different from what is addressed by existing programs. Skills that were once needed are no longer sought after. The course emphasized the development of soft skills and knowledge acquisition, so that our clients can make better informed decisions about their career. It's quite often that the areas in which persons with mental disabilities struggle, flexibility, coping with the dynamic and changing environment, are some of the most necessary skills in today's job market. This is why persons with mental disabilities often settle for non-skilled jobs. We founded the center to address these gaps, to better prepare people for the job market and to do so efficiently within a couple of months. The center and its mode of operations are completely unique in Israel and possibly in the world. The center takes all of our existing knowledge about the job market and trains people with mental disability for it through advanced digital means and gamification. The center is intended as a knowledge hub and a training center for integration into any job, not for specific skills, for specific jobs. It provides the most relevant and up-to-date knowledge of the world of work and how to integrate into it. The building blocks relevant to the job market as a whole and for the people who want to integrate into it. This includes the direction in which the job market is changing, the skills, what skills are necessary, transferable skills, how to choose a job, exposure to one disability, how to adjust for it, education, opportunities, the building of a personal career trajectory, and more. You already saw the center main hub. Now let me walk you through the other spaces of the center. In the Melia room, it's the big room that you see, participants learn actively and experimentally. Technology is utilizing to advance the process of stimulate decisions around the context. For example, you can see a breakdown of a participant's answer, or alternatively, enter text from the personal screen and see it on the main screen. And then it can have a better discussion about the theme that we talk about. The simulator, wait a second. The simulator is a room with an advanced camera that can be projected to the Melia room, and then we can make simulation about job interviews or exposure of the disability to the employee. The result of the third place that we have the virtual reality. This we use virtual reality to stimulate person and to expose them to many factories and places of work. Sorry, I lost my page, so I'm a little bit confused. Through the virtual reality, what we do is, first of all, expose the person to factories and like a board meeting. And the second thing that the virtual reality does is it maps skills of the persons, like working in a group, working under pressure, quantitative skills, and so on. And after we get these things, we can work with the person and help them make a better decision about what he needs to work on about things that he's strong at. The virtual reality is a very unique thing that we use. We bought it and we use it from a high-tech company that uses these things from with other high-tech company to better recruit persons. Sorry for my English. Here you can see another pictures of the center. Wait a second. This thing, I don't know if it works. Okay, we have a PC classroom with 10 computers. There people can work on the computers on applications that we developed who make like a job interview and things like that through gamification. You have like an avatar that asks you questions, and then you can answer, and you get a feedback after you answer it. What makes the process easier and more learnable. Go back. Okay, here are the more pictures. You can see the tablets. The tablets, you can choose different skills, and then you can see it on the main, on the giant screen in the middle. Okay, in conclusion, I think that the main goal of us here are faced with, myself representing rehabilitation services and others representing the employers, is to figure out how to best integrate persons with disabilities into the job market. In this dynamic world, a diverse work environment is ultimately beneficial for everyone, from the level of the particular person to the performance of a whole business. My job and the job of Shikum is to better prepare the person as well as to mediate between the person and the employee as necessary in order to achieve successful integration. Thank you, and if you have questions, I'll be happy to answer. Sorry for the video. I think it's better that you ask her to.
Yes, thank you so much. And we do have time for one question if anyone wants to ask a question. And as a reminder, anyone that's joining us online, we also would love questions, I know, from anyone that's joining us online too. So your questions are very welcome. So any questions, or we can move on to the next panelist and we will have time to ask him more questions. Okay, great. Megan?
Good morning, everybody. Can I just check the microphone's working? Yes, I'm seeing smiles, that's good. So morning, everybody. I'm Meg Horsburgh. I'm the Head of Diversity and Inclusion and Corporate Responsibility for Sodexo in the UK and Ireland region. And I also lead on our global diversity and inclusion efforts. If we could get the slides on the screen, that would be fantastic. Thank you. So maybe I'll just start by asking how many people have heard of Sodexo? Okay, actually quite a few. So I remember a few years ago when I first took this role, I'd ask that question and I would just be met with a kind of a sea of blank faces. So it's great to see that the kind of brand is getting out there. So unfortunately, many people come across Sodexo in situations where they may not necessarily want to be. So we offer facilities management services within hospital environments, within schools. I guess most people want to be in school, and also universities as well as kind of corporate settings. So our work has a really big footprint. We have around 460,000 employees globally, and we operate in somewhere in the region of 80 countries. The stats tend to vary a little. So like Shahar, I'm having a little problem with the slides. There we go. So our services are largely around facilities management, though things like catering, cleaning and grounds maintenance, but we also do some work around benefits and rewards, so creating platforms on which we can motivate and engage our clients' customers or employees. And then we also do some work delivering services in people's homes, so really broad range of businesses. And so, you know, perhaps given that broad range of services and our huge geographical footprint, it's perhaps not surprising that disability is one of the 5 areas that we focus on within our diversity and inclusion strategy globally. And if we can move to the next slide, this slide really shows the journey of our work on disability inclusion over the past years. So our work really started in earnest back in 2013, when we pulled together some stories of people with disabilities working across the Sodexo geography in different kinds of roles. I think at that point we recognised that there was very much a perception that people with disabilities were only within our lower level customer service frontline positions. And that's definitely something that we wanted to both address, and we wanted to make sure that that wasn't the case, but we also wanted to take the opportunity to raise the visibility of those of us with disabilities who were working within more senior positions. So since 2013, we've seen a whole heap of activity. In 2014, we launched our Global Disability Voice Governance Group. And that's a group that's made up of people from across our geographies who come together with the intention of raising awareness around disability and ultimately trying to make things better for both our colleagues, but also for our clients and our customers in that regard. That group is sponsored currently by not 1 but 2 members of our executive committee, which I think goes to show how important we think this topic is to our business moving forwards. And one of the activities that that group helps us to do on an annual basis is to develop some communication and awareness raising materials, which are rolled out across our global footprint. So those materials have very much focused on trying to bust myths and stereotypes. And so for those of you with great eyesight, you might just be able to see there at the bottom of the screen some of the posters that were developed as our first campaign. So they say things like, people with disabilities have nothing to contribute, which I think is a perception that people sadly still have. And then the second line on the poster reads, unless they're included. So I think, you know, clearly the purpose there is to remind us that we need to have diversity, but perhaps more importantly, we also need to make sure that people with disabilities are included within our corporate cultures. So those communication campaigns have very much focused around invisible disabilities, because we know that's a topic that's often not in the front of people's minds when they think about disability inclusion. And we've also made sure that those campaigns have built up some momentum around mental health. So I think, you know, whilst often we think about invisible disabilities, we think about conditions like mind dyslexia, dyspraxia, autism, things like that. We perhaps have been a little bit slower to get into the position of talking about mental health, which I think we all know is still taboo in many countries and indeed in many companies. And so we very much started to integrate that. And I'm delighted that in 2018, we had a really big campaign around mental health, and we released 2 videos, one of which I'll show you in a moment. So the first video was from our 2 global executive level sponsors, and they talked about why mental health and well-being is important for our organisation. They talked about the business impact that not having a culture where people can bring their whole selves to work and can be open about their mental health conditions, the impact that would have on our business. And one of our exec sponsors used a really powerful analogy of mental health and well-being is like traffic lights. So we can all have red days and we can all have green days. So a red day is a day where perhaps you're feeling stressed, maybe things aren't going so well, maybe you're sad because of something that's happened in your personal life, or you just don't feel yourself. Whereas a green day is a day where, you know, you feel willing and able to kind of take on the world. And so that was a really interesting analogy for us, and one that he put across far more articulately than I have just done in this video that was released to our whole organisation. And I think, you know, that analogy helped us to think about actually how do we find ways of integrating mental health and well-being into normal standard business conversations. And so one of the techniques that we've used over the past years to do that is safety moments. So I don't know how many people in the room are kind of familiar with the concept of safety moments, but certainly in some of the industries that we work in, like energy and resources, safety is really, really key, both to us and also our clients. And so Sodexo has a culture whereby we start all of our meetings with a safety moment. And the idea is it's an opportunity for us to pause and to reflect on what's really important. So it's not about revenue, it's not about business growth, it's absolutely about making sure that all of our colleagues go home safe at the end of the day, and our clients too. And so what we took the opportunity to do is to combine that kind of organisational cultural norm of having a safety moment at the beginning of meetings with actually some messaging around mental health and well-being, so that we could normalise the conversation. And so my colleagues have come up with some fantastic ways of doing that. So one way is the traffic light system, which was sort of really started by our executive level sponsor, but we've got other methods, perhaps using the weather to talk about your mood and how you're feeling on a particular day. And I feel like I should caveat that and say that surprisingly, perhaps, that concept didn't actually come out of the UK, despite everybody always thinking that we're obsessed with the weather.
You did mention it.
I did mention it, but we're not obsessed by it. So perhaps if we just play the video, and then maybe just as that's getting loaded, I'll just also share quickly that one of the other things that we've done in partnership with our colleagues in health, safety and environment over the past few months is the launch and development of a mental health and wellbeing e-learning, which has been launched globally. So if you could cue the video, thank you. It's always ambitious to do a video, but it's a good one. It'll be worth the wait.
Mental health conditions are universal. The fact is, we have all experienced firsthand or know someone close to us affected by a mental health condition. According to the World Health Organization, 1 in 4 of us will experience a mental health condition at some point in our life. Mental health conditions are among the leading cause of disability around the world. They are the leading cause of workplace absenteeism, costing the global economy $1 trillion each year. 1 in 6 of the working population will have a mental health condition at any given time. Yet, only 1 in 3 people experiencing a mental health condition will seek help and treatment. As leaders and employees, we must be prepared to talk about it. It's time to open our minds and change our view of mental health. As with our physical health, our mental health is not static. It changes over time on a continuum. But few of us know how to talk about our mental health. Some people are reluctant to seek help because of the stigma or prejudice perceived around mental health conditions. If left untreated, mental health conditions can become chronic, debilitating, and even life-threatening. But we can act now. Awareness of mental health and well-being is more important than ever. Mental health in the workplace benefits everyone. Everyone has a role to play in looking after their own mental health and in creating a mentally healthy environment for others. We must reduce stigma and build an understanding of mental health issues in the workplace. We need to support employees with mental health issues. We should build our skills and confidence in order to approach people we're concerned about. And we must increase awareness of Sodexo's commitment to creating a discrimination-free workplace. At Sodexo, we're committed to breaking through the stigma and providing a safe and inclusive work environment. Let's open our minds to mental health and well-being. Remember, it takes all of us to make a difference.
So I think, there's a whole lot of stats in that video, and I'm sure many people in this room will be really familiar with them. I think the one for me that's really striking is that only 1 in 3 people with a mental health condition will seek support. And I think that's something that as organisations we have a role, and perhaps some would say a duty to try and change. And I think, as the video says, breaking down that stigma is really critical to enabling people to feel that they can request that help and support when they need it. And as I said, this is part of an ongoing campaign for us. We're not done yet. It's very much a journey. We're very much learning as we go, but we're trying where possible to share our journey, and that video in particular is available on our website if you would like to put together. Thank you.
That was a very, very good job. And one thing that I have a question, I also want to allow the audience to ask a question online, or anyone in the room as well. But my question, and I believe you have a question or a comment to make as well. But the mental health, the stigmas and the prejudice that you mentioned, how does Sodexo really deal with all the stigmas, the changing laws, people identifying or not identifying in such a large geographical footprint that you have?
So I think it's a great question, and honestly, it's really complex. So that's why our global disability voice is really critical. Whilst I lead this agenda globally, I can't pretend to understand each of our 72, 80 countries. I lose count. This topic is going to feel very different in each and every one of those countries, and that's why our disability voice group is really critical, because they help us to take our global strategy, to take our global materials and make sure that they land in each of those countries. And I think, one of the things that we've done, which we think is really important, is that we've made a commitment that 100% of our workforce will have access to programs for people with disabilities by 2025. And I think for me, the really important part of that statement is it's around access for programs that support the inclusion of people with disabilities, because I think many of us in this room will be very aware, and I think certainly the materials that ILO have pulled together reinforce the fact that actually the biggest barrier to people with disabilities is most often other people's attitudes. And so that's something that we work hard.
Thank you. Sure.
Yeah, I have a question. The movie, first of all, the movie is great. You talked, I think, if I understood, you talked mostly about people who already works at Sodexo. My question is, what do you do to better integrate people with mental disability into the job market in your company? What adjustment do you do? Because if you have someone with a wheelchair, the adjustment is easier to do. if you have something, he has the depression or stress, you don't know, and you don't know what kind of adjustment to do. So this is my question.
So I think it's a really, really great question, and I think it has to be dependent upon what the individual needs. So I think, you know, our focus is on making sure that we're really clear throughout our recruitment processes that people understand who it is that they can contact to ask for that adjustment, to ask for that support during the interview process. So I think, you know, one person with depression, for example, may need something different in an interview situation from another. And it may also, back to that kind of continuum, it may also depend on that particular day. So I think, you know, we all have good days, we all have bad days. So I think that same kind of philosophy applies even when you have somebody with a diagnosed mental health condition. So I think it's very much needs to be driven by the individual. But I think from an organizational culture perspective, the thing that's really important is just normalizing all of those conversations, so that actually if a hiring manager does get a request from a candidate, they don't kind of panic and freak out. They think, this is okay, I've got this, I've got some skills, you know, I know how to have conversations with people in a kind of mature adult to adult way, which asks them what they need and doesn't make any assumptions.
It's really it's such a big stigma depending upon where you are, and I mean across the world it's such a big stigma. So I think it's very difficult for employers. I know it's something in the United States we're really dealing with. There's a lot of intensity. You probably haven't noticed the intensity happening all over our world, and we are finding productivity lost because of this, and people are afraid to come out. I myself came out a few years ago, and probably no big surprise that I have ADHD, but it was certainly a big surprise to me because no one ever told me. And women are typically underdiagnosed, especially women of my age group. And with that ADHD, which is wonderful when I'm, you know, zinging and doing a billion things, but comes depression. And of course, seasonal makes it much worse. So really, as an individual, knowing when to come out, as an individual, knowing when to protect your coworkers, and then the responsibilities of the employer it's a really big, complicated topic. And I thought it was very interesting what you said about the loss of productivity and the amount that it's costing companies each year, and what it's costing us with human capital across the board. And I would even argue that our moods change during the day. There can be, I mean, this morning when I realized, yeah, let me tell you, my heart is still pounding. So it's interesting because it's just part of who we are with these beautiful brains that we have, and really understanding the brain. So very good job, Megan, very good. Eugene, you want to go now?
Sure, happy to. I'm going to try the clicker. Good morning, everybody. I'm Eugene Farrell. I work with AXA PPP Healthcare, or we're now known as AXA Health in the UK. And I'm going to talk to you today more about the kind of work that we do with organizations, and a little bit about the stuff that we do with AXA. So I've worked in mental health and the supporting of mental health for more than 20 years. And I'm an employee assistance program specialist. I've worked with EAPs for well over 20 years now. Is everybody familiar with the concept of EAP? I don't need to go through that one. Okay, and so they're programs that provide access for employees to counselling, both over the telephone and face-to-face, as well as a number of other services. I'm the current chair of the UK EAPA. I've been the chair, I've been a member of a European board in the same type of work, and also worked on the American board as an international representative. So let me just talk about the stuff that we get involved with. Yeah, it's not easy, this clicker. Oh, there we go. Okay, so we all have mental health. That's absolutely true. So I'm going to sort of talk a little bit and build up on what Megan has already said. So everybody has mental health just like we have physical health. And in many ways, the work that we do separates it off. But mental health is not a separate thing completely. And in the UK, we have a lot of very strong mental health charities that have been doing a lot of work to increase the conversation around mental health and to reduce the stigma that's associated with mental health conversations and enabling people to talk about their own mental health. And mental health itself is not just the absence of mental illness, because we all have mental health. And it's very much accepted, I think, now in business in the UK that in order for employees to flourish, then they need to have both good mental health and good physical health. Oh, too many. There we go. No. Okay. One of the things that I do want to talk about is the way people bring their mental health to work, because we're all human, aren't we? And as I said, we don't separate those two things off. And our personal lives affect us at work in the same way that our work lives affect us at home. And it's only natural that we would bring that to work as part of our normal working day. But we know that work alone doesn't always lead to mental health issues for people. Certainly in a lot of the work that we do and a lot of the people that we talk to, it's their personal lives and the things that happen outside of work that have a much greater influence upon their mental health than necessarily their work and their work environment. Nevertheless, in the UK, we have legislation and we have law that says that one, we mustn't discriminate, and secondly, we mustn't make somebody's mental health worse as part of their work. So employers have an incentive, and I was talking about this with Shahar just yesterday. So we have an incentive to comply with the law, but I think a lot of our employers now are already well past that. So it's not just about reducing their risk of litigation. It's about being a good workplace and providing good work and good places to work. And you can see from the example that Megan brought that really employers are working hard to do this and to make places a great place to work. So employers see mental health as a key subject. That's something that affects both that performance, presenteeism, and attendance. And supporting mental health in the workplace is a good thing for business. So it's a good thing to do. And that's what we're starting to see much more of. So we're kind of, in many ways, we're past that difficult conversation about why should I talk about mental health, because a lot of employers are already seeing the benefits of doing that. And to be a good employer and to attract good employees to your workplace, then you have to have a number of things in place. And the next generation of employees who are coming up are looking at their employers and saying, well, what have you got? What supports can you provide? How am I going to be able to work in this environment? And what am I going to get out of work? So it's a very different environment, I think, than we've seen necessarily in the past. And I went backwards. There we go. So ensuring that that employees feel safe and feel psychologically safe is really important. We know from a study of from HR professionals and boards that some 62% of organizations feel that their boards find that mental health is the biggest area of concern for them. So that's really huge, isn't it? And so that's the thing that they're putting lots more effort into now, certainly in the UK, than even the physical health that we're seeing. So it is becoming one of those huge issues. And from an organization like AXA, which is a medical insurer, which has occupational health services and provides psychological services, it means that, I guess, from a sales perspective, that's much easier for us when the board are actually saying, we really want to talk about these things and we really want things in place. So it makes it very, very easy for us in many ways. Not that easy, but certainly easier. But what we see and what we want to see are not necessarily the same things. So it's not just a tick box exercise, although there are still some organizations who are doing that. And it needs to have a very kind of strategic approach. So while organizations find it really important to talk about mental health, there are also organizations that buy and include lots and lots of different mental health services without a kind of strategic aim of what they're doing to get all of that in place. So you can't just buy yourself out of this by getting all the services that are available out there, because they become very confusing for employees. You get multiple offerings to do the same thing, you get overlaps. And so that's not a great way to go with things. And so one of the things that we try and do is work much more strategically. I'm glad that Megan brought up the continuum, because I use this model all the time to talk about mental health, because mental health is a broad continuum. And one of the things that we try and do in supporting mental health is to stop people's mental health getting worse or acquiring a mental health problem during their lifetime. That would mean that they become ill as a result of mental health, and that would become a disability to them. So we spend a lot of time and effort now with organizations trying to help them to prevent poor mental health in the workplace. So the sort of things that we get involved with are things like mental health awareness. And so we've been doing this for many, many years. And there's a program that's very popular in the UK called Mental Health First Aid, which originally was an Australian program. And lots of organizations are creating mental health first aiders, and we do the same within AXA currently. Although I noticed that some organizations are moving away from those sort of given programs to developing their own in-house mental health awareness programs. We spend a lot of time working on resilience and resilience training, and creating mental health champions in the workplace. And for a lot of organizations, those mental health first aiders and mental health champions are the first line of individuals discussing their mental health with somebody that's trusted and somebody that they feel able to talk to, much more so than their line manager. And doing these sort of programs, it opens up minds and it reduces the stigma around mental health. And so we work with line managers to do that as well. But in that kind of middle area, we provide things like mental health coaching to organizations on the back of wellbeing programs. We provide, and there are many mental health apps out there. Gosh, I do a talk often about mental health and technology. And I've been tracking mental health apps for years. One of the things that I try and do is find new ones and try and break them. Just to see what they're like. But there are something like 1,500 mental health apps out there. There are many that overclaim. They're not necessarily clinical. How do you know what's happening with your data? How can you trust them? It's a real, I guess it's a real minefield in what you would do and what you would buy. So some of the work that we do is helping organizations to understand what apps are there, and then to work with very specific apps that we know and are trusted, that do proper clinical work and not do things that they shouldn't do, and have very clinical safe approaches to things. Beyond that, we have obviously employee assistance programs that provide support to employees, and counseling, both face-to-face, telephone, and much more digital as well these days. And in our world, because we have medical insurance as part of our programs, we can provide access, and very quick access, to psychiatric consultation, as well as what we call mental health treatment pathways and things like cognitive behavioral therapy. So within our organization, what we try and do is help people to share, and oops, I've gone too far. I don't know if I'm going forwards or back. There we go. We try and help people to share and talk about their own particular stories. So we talk about bringing the 100% of yourself to work as well. We employ globally about 125,000 people, about 9,000 in the UK. And this has very much been a part of what we do. We know that something like 14% of workers don't feel comfortable talking about mental health and stress. Although that's starting to change, I think, in the UK. And Megan said earlier about the 1 in 4 figure. But we also know that things like 74% of LGBT employees experience mental health problems. So it's about trying to get all the groups talking about their mental health. So it's very much part of the DNA of what we do. One of the things that we also know is that something like 6% of people with mental health conditions in the workplace have had those conditions for more than 10 years. They probably haven't disclosed them, and they probably don't feel comfortable doing that. And that's really the kind of crux of the work that we're trying to do. Next slide, please. I've resorted to trying to get some help. It's just not going. There we go. Beyond what we do with clients, etc., we try as an organization to be helpful and altruistic as an organization to help society. And we wanted to do something a little bit more meaningful with a client partner that we work with, so we sponsor the kit for Liverpool Football Club. And we wanted to do something more with them, a bit more of a partnership. So we're helping young people as part of their youth foundation. They're already doing this program, but we wanted to provide some mental health support to this organization, to the club members, to help the kids. Because if we can help kids with their mental health to feel much more comfortable talking about their mental health, then that's going to be great for the future. And I'm a big believer in us doing that in schools, to younger kids, with parents, etc., because I think that could really help in the future, rather than relying on employers to do a lot of the work. So it's about opening minds early, it's about removing stigma really early, and it's about normalizing mental health conversations. Next slide, please. So we developed a campaign called Sharing Makes Us Stronger, which we developed a video which we put out there. It wasn't based on any products that we had, and it featured Sophie Bradley Auckland here, who's the captain of the Liverpool Women's Football Club, who talked about her own struggles with injury, with self-doubt, and with her own resilience. So this kind of role model out there is a really big helpful part in enabling conversations around mental health, and particularly young women in sport, which are underrepresented anyway, and it's something that we wanted to do. So that's really enhancing our partnership. It's good for us to do, obviously as a business, but it's also a good thing to do overall. Next slide. And I hope that I can just share with you just very briefly a very short video that relates to this program.
My name's Alex Reid. I work for AXA, and I've been part of the team that's training youth mental health first aid champions at the LFC Foundation, the official charity of Liverpool Football Club. The trainees receive a range of skills that they can use to support young people and increase their confidence in terms of recognising signs and symptoms to help people live healthier, happier lives.
I said it was short. The other version is like 3 minutes, 3-4 minutes long. It's just way too long. So that's the kind of the real altruistic work that we're doing, and we really do believe in all of those things. So I hope you've enjoyed the presentation and learned a few things, and I'm happy to take some questions.
Thank you, Eugene. Very, very interesting. And I also had promised that y'all could ask Megan a question, and then I did not do that. So I'm going to ask a question of Eugene, but I want to, if you want to ask Megan or Eugene a question, I want to, and yeah, you know that I'm going to take it off the table, so I'm going to definitely let you do it this time. But the question I have is, you mentioned 1,500 apps, and I know with artificial intelligence, we're seeing more apps coming around. And I think some of these apps can be valuable, but I thought it was a good point that you said that some of them are not helpful, and they often overclaim what they can do to support us as we understand each of us, how our brains work, and how we can be better and bring our best selves to work. And then I promise we will definitely, don't let me forget to let the audience talk.
So both AI and chatbots they're different things, and a lot of the apps use chatbots now. And let me tell you something that I found. So I worked with a new app, and it had a chatbot conversation, and I got this particular chatbot to agree to my suicide attempt the next day. The chatbot said to me, "Yes, that's a great idea. Why don't you do that tomorrow?" And that's an example of how a badly programmed app can really work against the things that we're trying to do. So that was fed back to the organization. It's just down to bad programming and to some degree, not necessarily understanding the context in which it's working. AI that's coming. I mean, we're not there yet, and replacing. I mean, there are some AI therapists out there. There's a program called Ellie, which came out of the Brave Mind program from the US, which was a veterans program that used it used virtual reality to immerse veterans into kind of those same environments that they were in before. Great stuff that you were talking about earlier. And out of that came a virtual therapist. They're very, very early days yet. There was a gunnery sergeant one as well that I tried out. So I had a couple of chats with him. I haven't tried Ellie, but the gunnery sergeant was really quite basic. But it's going to be a while yet before we've got AI therapists. So I'm not really an advocate of it at the moment. Humans are still great, aren't they? There's nothing like sitting opposite a human, you know, as a counselor and talking to them.
Okay, I'm definitely going to take some. So why don't we start with you? I'm going to. We'll take a few questions, but we'll keep going. But do you want to start first, Andy?
Hi, yeah, it's Andy Garrett from GSK. It was really great to hear a couple of speakers talking about the options, the openness, the support. I like the analogy about the green days and the red days. I'm wondering what more we can do to develop the disability confidence of not just managers, but actually principally colleagues, peers, to spot this. I was pleased the short video mentioned signs and symptoms. What can we do to help people spot the signs or symptoms of a red day, and then to help obviously signpost, because it's a really tricky conversation to start with a colleague.
So I absolutely agree. I think it is really tricky to actually just be able to say, I've noticed that you're not yourself today, or you behaved a little bit differently from how you normally do. Is everything okay? And I think we just need to find really simple ways that people can open up those conversations. And so one of the things that's built into the mental health and wellbeing awareness module that we've just launched globally is absolutely that. It's some kind of almost example conversations, which give people this frame of, I'm raising this because I've noticed that something is different, or I'm raising this because I've noticed that you didn't behave like you normally behave. And then just asking some open questions. And then obviously having the confidence to be able to respond to what you're told and to signpost people critically to, whether it's an EAP provider or whether it's a mental health charity in the country that you operate in. But I think we just need to normalize those situations and those conversations. And I think what we found through the safety moments is that people are, back to your point, people are just having really human conversations around, I've had a rubbish morning this morning, my alarm clock didn't go off, I'm feeling a little bit harassed, or, my teenage child is kind of playing up at the moment. And it's just helping people to kind of bring some of the stuff that happens outside of work into the workplace, because exactly to your point, we don't have a work life and a home life. They inevitably are kind of merged, and I think with technology they're merging even more. So I think our experience is the more that we can normalize those conversations and have people just share, I'm not feeling myself today, it's our belief that that's going to help people to then share actually that they do have perhaps a bit more of a diagnosed or a serious mental health condition. So it's very much a journey, but that's some of what we've done.
Yeah, I would just add a little bit to that and just talk about the Time to Change program. So that's been going some while now, and that's got some great conversation starters. And I'm a big believer in ask twice, because that's particularly in our culture. How are you? I'm great. And you can see on their face they're not great. So you ask again, no, how are you? And it's getting that confidence to be able to just push it a little bit further, but not being too pushy around it. So conversation starters are great. Yeah, I think and particularly with line managers, getting them to know. But the army of kind of mental health awareness people out there, not just first aiders, but everybody who can be aware of other people's mental health. We can find trusted conversations to happen. So, I mean, I've seen lots of good examples. Probably some of the work that that I'm doing now, which is much more complex, is having suicide ideation conversations. So those are the ones that are kind of coming up more and more with organizations. It's like, what do I do with that conversation and where do I go with it? And that's a whole other session on its own.
I will talk through the client eyes because you talk through the employee eyes. And I think what you said, it's really true. A simple conversation, questions, ask him how they feel. And about the thing that you said about suicide, I think that we need also to be careful and not to go to places that we don't know. The employees doesn't really know what happens to the person. Sometimes it's something with their kids, but sometimes he has a schizophrenia or stress or something like this. And questions like suicide or things like that can be challenging. So I think simple questions, to know a little bit about the person, as you said, to look at him, to see the impressions and things like that. This is the most important thing. And I see it as a mediator between the employees and the worker. Many times the employee comes to me and says, okay, talk to the person, ask him how he feels. No, I think it's the job of the employee to do it, but to do it gently and in a gentle way. Thank you.
Eleanor, I saw you had your hand up.
Hi, Eleanor Lacano from the Idea Hub at Worcester Polytech Institute in Massachusetts. So I'm so glad you guys are talking about this. I am, one of the things that we do at our university, we're very project-based, and I have students who are actually working on a mindfulness-based stress reduction app. Specifically right now looking at young adults who have stress, anxiety, and depression. But one of the things that we've found in the research that we're doing is that people don't, especially with stress reduction, or excuse me, with stress, anxiety, and depression, is that to have apps that kind of pull the person away from human contact is not actually preferred, that they actually want to have it as a support for classes that they might take in mindfulness. And the people that I'm working with at UMass Medical School, one of the things that we're trying to do is have it all be evidence-based, which I don't think a lot of the apps that are out there, as Eugene had said, are evidence-based. So the mindfulness-based stress reduction is all evidence-based research to support it. It has to be peer-reviewed. So I guess I have two questions from what you have said. One is, do you see that as something that would be very supportive? Because one of the things we're actually hoping to do is what you're talking about, is scrape data from the phone, not to give to employers or that, but to have a support network for the person themselves to say, you know, you look like you're having one of those red light days. Maybe you should do this particular breathing exercise, which seems to work well for you. So we're looking at doing that. So one, do you see something like that helping with what you are doing? And the other thing I had was from an earlier conversation, and you don't have to answer this, but if you get a chance, and that is, how do you see working with universities in that because you know that's the pipeline into the companies, and kind of getting them in the know and how to help the students during that huge change process into the workforce. But I prefer the first question that you address first, so I'll give it to you. Thank you.
Shall I talk to the app question?
Yes, and then we're going to go on to the next presentation, and we'll come back to Q&A.
Right. Yes, I do think it's supportive and helpful, and that's exactly where personally I see apps adding great value. So it's an insight tool. It can help you in kind of the very low level feelings. It can things like mood meters are helpful for your tracking, and organizations, if they provide an app for the whole workforce, can scrape data off that they can look at. As to whether, I mean, you can use things like mindfulness-based therapy and CBT approaches, which are evidence-based, as a kind of helpful insight tool to help with negative automatic thoughts, for example, but they're not therapy. They're not that thing, and they really shouldn't be going that far, I don't think. So they should be signposting out, particularly where risk is evident.
Okay, we're going to go on to Neil and come back for questions. I know several of you have more questions or comments. So Neil?
Can we go to my first slide? because we're not at the first slide by some way. Excellent, super. And I'm going to rely on you because the Zub is rubbish, right? So if we can go to the next slide. So this is me. I know how to use Photoshop. So those flames aren't real, unfortunately. So I'm head of accessibility globally for Atos. I do some work with the W3C. I'm part of our sort of thought leadership groups. Personally, I'm dyslexic, and recently I found out that I'm also ADHD, which explains a lot. I've lived with mental health issues, particularly when I was undiagnosed, probably because I was undiagnosed, have medicated as a result of that, have benefited from medication. I want to be open that this is not something that people should be ashamed of. I know a lot of people are very uncomfortable about talking about medication. There's still the stigma. I felt it myself. I was happier talking about my dyslexia than I was talking about my mental health. Outside of work, I'm co-founder of the largest Twitter chat in Europe, which I do with Debra. I do some stuff with the Diversity Board for UK Institute of Coding. I'm doing stuff with World Institute on Disability. And also, particularly pertinent to what we're going to talk about today, I'm on the board of a company, a community interest company called Genius Within. So next slide, please. So neurodiversity, well, what's in a name? Because actually there's still a really large amount of debate around the language. You know, the latest thinking is actually that neurodiversity encompasses everyone. You know, it reflects the diversity of our brains across society, and that you know, there are various different states. So the people that are neurologically typical are neurotypicals, or NTs. And then there is this whole thing of neurodivergence, which has often been called neurodiversity, but we're still debating around the language. But then that's the ADHD, the autistic spectrum conditions, mental health conditions, acquired neurodiversities through brain injuries. I did a good job on that myself recently. Dyslexia, dyscalculia, the list goes on, and there's a lot of overlap, and people have neurodivergent traits. One of the key points I want to make is that difference is not deficit. We actually have positives as well. There are very many positive things that come out of your neurodivergent, of being different. Next slide, please. So dyslexia is misunderstood, and this stimulation is not entirely accurate, but what it does give you is some kind of approximation of the difficulty that people have in consuming text. Right? So quite often, you know, I read. So if we go to the next slide. There is this myth that people with dyslexia can't read. We do. It just takes us longer, right? I have 2 degrees, one of which is in English and literature and history from Oxford, right? The second one's an MBA. But I still don't enjoy reading. It's painful for me. Actually, writing's even more painful, like physically painful. I grip the pen so hard that my knuckles are white. If you keep your language simple and clear and use clear fonts and don't squash everything together, and you left justify stuff, you're helping people like me. You're also helping a lot of other people too, because clarity of information equals efficiency. Next slide, please. This guy has a better working memory than me. You know? And this affects how I work and how a lot of people with neurodivergent traits work. You know? So poor working memory, or distractibility, in the case of Debra and I with the ADHD, shiny, affects things like note-taking, our ability to concentrate in online meetings, following directions and instructions, and this affects both our working life and our relationships. So when we're lost, and I drive up to someone and I wind down the window and I ask for directions, by the time the person has got to the 3rd one, I've lost the 1st one. So I stopped, and my wife thought it was just because I was a man. No, I use sat-nav because I have these neurodivergent traits. So I use software, I use tools. It affects my memory in terms of the critically important thing that I was doing before you pinged me on Skype or Twitter or any of the other channels that I'm constantly checking. And if you really want to make me feel nervous, ask me to take the meeting minutes. This is a slight anecdote, but I was on the Cognitive Accessibility Task Force for the W3C, and when they went round asking who's going to take minutes, you'd got 20 people on the call, all who were neurodivergent. No one wanted to take the minutes. Next slide, please. I hate forms. I'm really glad that we live in an age where we have electronic forms now, because when we had to do paper forms, I was that person that would take 5 paper forms because I would screw up the first 4. So don't make me use paper. At least with online forms, we've got spell checkers and other tools that can help fill in some of this stuff for me. And another plea to people that are making these forms that if I make a mistake, don't make me go back to the beginning and guess where my mistake is. Show me, right? Show me where I've screwed up. Next slide, please. So I do not know my left from my right. I wear my watch on the wrong hand. So when I'm thinking about my left and right, I actually have to think, which hand's my watch on? That's my right hand. And so that thought process takes me longer to determine which way I'm going. So I do get disoriented. But this is not just in the physical world. I actually get disoriented in the digital world too. So we go to the next slide, please. User interfaces are places where I get lost. It's really easy for me to struggle with day-to-day navigation and recalling where functions are in software. And even with things that I use on a regular basis, it can be a case of continuous trial and error on things that I've been using all the time. And what's worse is that we now live in a world of evergreen software. You can go to bed at night and wake up the next morning and find that your Office package is updated and they've moved all of your icons around and all of your menus. It's like leaving the house, going out, opening the front door and finding that they put your bedroom furniture in the living room. So what I really need is for people to make stuff obvious. I want clarity so that I know where I'm going, what I'm supposed to be doing. And I'm not alone in this. In fact, if we do make stuff clear and obvious, then everyone's going to benefit because everyone can use stuff better. So supporting neurodivergent traits, neurodiversity, supports businesses to be more effective and employees to be more effective, and websites that are trying to sell stuff or complete tasks to be more effective too. So there is a good business case for doing this, right? I used to work in the part of our business that ran our workplace and service desk, and we'd measure effectiveness on things like, number of calls to the service desk that have been reduced. And so if you make stuff obvious, then you're reducing calls to the service desk. You're reducing the number of £12 per call charges that the company is having to pay. Great example of this was pensioner bonds. In the UK, the government issued cheap savings bonds to older people. And our organization had to deal with that on behalf of the government bank. And we did quite a good job on the first bit, but when you link 2 pensioners together, it got too complex. And my parents were going for these bonds and they go, well, we did the first bit online, then we got stuck. So we had to call the nice man. Calling the nice man costs money. So if you get it right and you make it simple, you don't have to talk to the nice man. It's not that I don't like humans. I do. It's part of my day-to-day interactions. But there are times when we don't need to do that. Next slide, please. So a bit like Debra, time is really not my strong point. It affects dyslexia affects my timekeeping. I have a poor sense of time and dates, and then I go into hyper-focus, which means I go down the rabbit hole. I misread meeting times, I get the day, week wrong. It's not uncommon for me to book meetings in the past or on a weekend. Traveled to Manchester recently on a ticket that was for the day before. I printed it out on the right day, but I got mixed up in the user interface and bought it on the wrong day. I was very lucky that the guard took pity on me and wrote on the ticket, because otherwise it would have cost me £200. So there is a penalty that we pay as individuals for these kind of things that we struggle for. There is a financial penalty. And I'm reliant on tasks and calendars and reminders. And when they fail, like Debra's did today, I do too. Next slide, please. So dyslexia means that I see things differently. Neurodivergence means that we see things differently, where some people can't see the wood for the trees. Can you press next, please? I see forests, and in a particular case, it's, I've gone off on a bit of a wild tangent, but it's just to illustrate the point that actually we benefit when we think differently. How did we get to the Bay of Pigs disaster? Well, that was groupthink. Now, if you employ people with different ways of thinking, if you have diverse teams, then you're not going to have that kind of groupthink. So diversity in general and neurodiversity in your organization is of great benefit. Next slide, please. So we've seen some stuff on virtual reality already. So we've been working with the BBC and some academic institutions to create an immersive experience to help people understand what the overstimulation that people who are neurodivergent experience on a regular basis, because we do also experience the world differently. The carpets move, shiny stuff is going off all over the place, we're oversensitive to sounds and so on, and we're easily distractible. So you can immerse yourself in this world, and as a result of that, hopefully we're building empathy, we're helping people understand how to manage their colleagues better or interact with their colleagues better, but also how to design systems and environments better. And what we're also doing is linking this up to sort of galvanic skin response, so that we can ramp up and ramp down the experiences, because as we get anxious, actually our sensitivities increase and decrease as we calm down. So we're trying to make this flexible and fluid and responsive at the same time, while staying within ethical boundaries, because we don't want to give any neurotypical a meltdown. So if we go to the next slide, please. Some stuff that we can do when we're designing for the web. Yeah, well, don't overload us, right? This is just like horrendous, right? I've used this slide a lot. It's probably the thing that breaks, you know, screen readers the easiest. God bless Ling Valentine. She picked up on it on Twitter and she said, "This is not copyright Atos, this is copyright Ling Valentine." I give Ling credit for the monstrosity that is her website. Next slide, please. On the other extreme, minimalist design also minimizes the number of people that you can use your website. You know, gray on gray looks great if you're a 25-year-old hipster graphic designer, but you've got hollow ghost buttons here. Can you see the button that says food menu? You know, we're taking style over substance, over effectiveness, and there's duplication. Do you contact someone or do you inquire? All of this kind of stuff is confusing to people who are neurodivergent or have intellectual disabilities. And it's just bad for other people too. You know, it's bad for people of my parents' age. Next slide, please. We want to give people clear affordances. And a great example of this is in iOS, where you can turn on things like button shapes. Because when they changed the design, they made stuff look like text. So I didn't know, and lots of people like me did not know, whether something was just something we read or something we need to do. Tell people what it is that they need to do. So being able to turn this on in the accessibility settings helps people to remain effective. Simple stuff. Next slide, please. And really, I shouldn't need shades to use your app. Glare is a real problem for people with dyslexia. It makes me have rivers of text. Stuff is shimmering on the screen. But at the same time, I don't want stuff that is horrible, right? A lot of people think, oh, accessibility means you have to make it look terrible. No, you don't. you can have nice design and be accessible. It's, you know, I don't want a cream background with royal blue fonts, which is what often, and Comic Sans. Sorry, but that infantilizes me. So we want good, clear fonts, and you can just reduce the white point. We want sufficient contrast, not mega contrast, because actually, when we talk about disabilities and so on, quite often my visually impaired colleagues want high contrast. That makes me want to run from the room screaming, because that sets me off. So we need to enable people to have their own preferences. Next slide, please. That's it. I'm at the end. If you have questions, please feel free.
And we are going to watch a video, and so I would like to ask the speakers if they will stay afterwards, so for any questions. But right now we're gonna watch a video that we were going to watch at the beginning, and make sure that we have time for the rapporteur, and then we'll have hopefully time for a couple of questions. Yes, you will go for this is
Doesn't help.
yeah. Yes, absolutely. All right, you're going to introduce the video. Thank you.
Gladly. Hello. Good morning. I'm Judith. I'm from the Israel Mission here in Geneva. It's a pleasure to be here. And thank you for having us here. The short scene that we're about to see, with the kind help of Yes Studios, was taken from an Israeli popular TV series called On the Spectrum, which gives us a glimpse into the lives of young autistic adults and offers a unique view of day-to-day life. The heroes of the series are three roommates in their late 20s who share a state-sponsored apartment and learn to adjust and integrate as independent adults in the community, including the world of work. The series has spurred a lively debate within the Israeli community on the potential and challenges that may come with what may be perceived as simple activities such as preparing for a job interview. So we hope this, watching it here will spur the same meaningful discussion, and that will focus on ways to ease and overcome these challenges, as we've heard from the speakers. Thank you.
שמי רון, בן 33 מרמת גן, במקור אני בסן פרנסיסקו, גרתי שם עם הוריי ואחיי, אבל עברתי לארץ לגור עם סבתי.
Detail. Let me just say that these are hands down the best budget earphones you can actually buy. Now, if you have already subscribed to the channel.
יעלית, מוזמנת להיכנס.
תודה.
זה בטוח שאם אני אצליח ברעיון אני אקבל את הרום ב-980?
זה מה שהם אמרו, נכון? יאללה, נמשיך?
שואלת בתור יעלי או בתור המראיינת?
שאלתי בתור יעלי, אבל עכשיו אני אשאל אותך בתור מראיינת, ואתה תענה לי בתור מרואיין, טוב? אז שוב, תספר לי עצמך.
שמי רון, בן 33 מרמת גן, במקור אני בסן פרנסיסקו, גרתי שם עם הוריי ואחיי, אבל עברתי לארץ לגור עם סבתי בגבעתיים, היא מתה מאז, היה לה קטרקט.
רון, אני אעצור אותך רגע. זה היה מצוין איך שהצגת את עצמך, ושוב, אני מזכירה לך שאתה צריך להתמקד בכל מה שקשור לרעיון עבודה, אוקיי? לכל הנושא של המחשבים. אז רון, אתה יכול לספר לי על עצמך?
שמי רון, אני בן 33 מרמת גן, ואני טוב במחשבים.
אולי פה אתה יכול להרחיב על הידע שלך במחשבים, אתה יודע לספר שיש לך תואר.
כמובן, את אומרת לי מצד אחד לדבר הרבה, ומצד שני לא לדבר בכלל.
אני אומרת שברעיון עבודה אתה צריך לספר על היתרונות שלך, אוקיי? ולא להתפזר ולספר דברים לא רלוונטיים כמו הטיול לאורודיסט בגיל 8.
בגיל 9.
רון, תנסה להתרכז.
שמי רון, בן 33 ברמת גן, יש לי תואר במחשבים, אני מומחה לכל עניין האבטחה והקידוד, ועושה זאת מהר מן הממוצע.
יופי, מעולה. עכשיו זה הבול, אתה רואה? גם היית ממוקד וגם יצרת קשר עין, שעל זה אתה צריך לשמור. כן, אתה יכול למצמץ.
לא צריך, אבל יש לו את זה גם אחרי כוס לקורא, כן, כי לפעמים גם באמצע.
היי, בבקשה.
זה קורסון שוקולד לא מחומם? שכחת להביא.
Well, I think that's a really, really impressive video. Yes, but also can we get a link? Is it something that we will be able to get a copy of? Because that's a very powerful video. Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Don, our rapporteur.
Thank you. And as our time is moving quickly, I just really kind of wanted to talk about two things. One was some common actions that I captured that I thought everyone in this room could take back and really think about or incorporate. The first one being around having a mental health strategy from communication and training, benefits and services, consultancy advice, and even your intervention services. How are you approaching that? How are you thinking about that? Bringing global groups together to share stories and help develop communication and awareness materials, help drive that discussion with leadership, including getting leadership sponsorship. Use the start of meetings to have discussions, kind of taking the safety moment concept and mixing it up and using things like mental health and other inclusion themed topics. Programs like Sharing Make Us Stronger, which get us out of the work environment into the community, working with children, parents, even universities to educate and remove stigma early, just not waiting until people are actually in the work environment or looking to enter the work environment. Thinking about programs to help build career paths and education, how handling interviews, job searches, and other things to help support people. And then kind of the last one I just had is kind of this whole concept of helping everyone by keeping things clear and making them obvious, but that doesn't mean go to the complete other end of a spectrum and go as minimal as possible. Just make things very accessible for everyone. The other thing that I looked at is just some potential areas of future research just based upon the discussion and things I heard. I still think there's lots of opportunities if we really start thinking about virtual reality, simulators, e-learning programs, AI, mental health apps, and different things like theirs. I think there's a lot of opportunities there to really understand the pros, the cons, the benefits, and how those are developing over time. Opportunities around developing competencies in managers and leaders around mental health, both awareness and how to opening up those conversations, but also understanding to have navigation, especially in light of some of the comments around suicide concerns and thinking about that. I also just, from my perspective, kind of was looking at universal design. I think it's getting very good on the physical side of how we design spaces and workplaces, but really starting to think about the invisible mental health and what are successful programs that help increase that access. And I'll be here if anyone thinks I missed anything or would like anything to be added, please feel free to come up and let me know. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Don. So we have about 1 more minute, so we might have time for one question, and then hopefully, and yes, I see your hand is up already, so let me pick on you.
I'm Eileen Hopkins from AI Media. We've provided your captions today, which I
hope you found useful. But most of my working life, I've worked in autism. And my question really is for all the panel. Do you think that the legal and moral responsibilities that employers now have for mental health, well-being, for supporting people with a range of neurodiverse issues is providing a barrier to recruitment? Because there are still, the majority of people with disability do not have a job, and it's to do with how they get a job in the first place. And a lot of the concentration today has been on the well-being of people within companies who now have both a legal and a moral responsibility to support people. But my question really is that a barrier?
So I think there are still significant barriers. We're trying to address them as a collective, as industry. The statistics for neurodivergent people are even worse than they are for disability employment gap generally. The employment gap for autistic individuals is even worse. It's much harder, and yet we have these skills. Some of it is down to the recruitment processes. Actually, we are choosing people based upon not how they will do the job, but how they interview. So we're choosing for sociability, we're choosing for how they present themselves, and not actually how they do their job. And that needs to change. And actually, do we need to interview people? So where there has been success has been in job shadowing and work experience and placements. And I think that I like to see more of that, and it's something that we're actively working on.
Does anyone else want to comment? Thank you. So we're going to end the session, but the speakers will stay up here. I know that we're going to go into a coffee break now before the next session, but thank you all so much for attending this session. Thank you to the speakers.